will never forget Stephen Lawrence, a talented student and loving son, adored by his parents, Neville and Doreen, tragically taken from them at the age of 18. My world changed on the 22nd of April 1993. News headlines read murdered by white youths at a bus stop, innocently. That was gut-wrenching and stuck on my mind. Chosen randomly, wrong place, wrong time. His black face could easily have been mine. It was my George Floyd moment back then, you see, and it still makes no sense to me. For an unforgiving family trial, where even Nelson Mandela came to raise the profile and walk the long walk with the Lawrence family, shaming the Met and the Race Relation Act's inadequacies. The fact that the act is needed at all is a failure of a Britain that gave that famous call to a Windrush generation to come lend a hand.
To help rebuild this motherland.
You tell me, how should I react when most choose to ignore the Race Relations Act that states socially, economically, educationally and more?
To discriminate on the grounds of race
is simply
against the law. We know the law. It's not some apparition in black people's heads or chips on shoulders of race issues long dead. We see those not willing to admit to uncomfortable pasts, not knowing for us that these histories last. This is why it took 18 long years and a Macpherson report through blood, sweat and tears that saw the abolition of the double jeopardy law. 2 out of the 5 retried is something Britain never experienced before. A black family actually changing the law to bring about convictions that said, in 2012, 2 will serve life for killing Stephen dead. I wish I could say it's done and dusted and we're happy with pride, but it isn't, I can't lie. When black people like Stephen continue to die. None of this I've said is done to create any controversy.
It's simply explaining what brought us here to support
Stephen's legacy. In this moment of global unrest, where people of all ethnicities are voicing their protest, alongside black people, to say we will no longer ignore the racism we all deplore. And that's why we will honor Stephen with humility and embrace all the differences and diversity of our human race, in celebration of all Britain can be.
In our families, our lives,
and our communities. We will make the changes that we need to see, raising our voices in all we do. We will educate everyone
that he is part of all of us too.
And we will never forget Stephen Lawrence.
Good evening. My name is Kenisha Hammond-Perry, and I serve as director of the Stephen Lawrence Research Center at De Montfort University here in Leicester. On behalf of the Stephen Lawrence Research Center's team, we would like to welcome you to tonight's webinar, which will highlight the tremendous work that the Stephen Lawrence Day Foundation is doing to advance the legacy of Stephen Lawrence and to promote the cause of social justice across the UK and beyond. As we pause this evening to honor and commemorate the legacy of Stephen Lawrence, we must never forget that his was a life of promise cut short far too soon. He was a son, a brother, and a friend whose memory is held dear and continues to inspire change. This evening's webinar will take place in 3 segments. In the first segment, we'll be joined in conversation with Baroness Doreen Lawrence and Imran Khan QC, whom I will introduce shortly. They will be discussing some of the early work of the Stephen Lawrence Day Foundation. In our second segment, we will hear from local educators and students here in Leicester to gain a glimpse of some of the work that's been happening in Leicester in support of Stephen Lawrence Day. In our final segment, we will be joined by local educators to hear more about how Stephen Lawrence's legacy is continuing to shape the education landscape in the 21st century. Throughout the evening, we invite you to post questions and in the chat and in the live tweet using the hashtags SLDay and Legacy for Change. Again, we are so pleased and honored to be joined this evening by Stephen Lawrence's mother, Baroness Doreen Lawrence, the former Chancellor of De Montfort University and founding patron of the Stephen Lawrence Research Center. Baroness Lawrence has received numerous accolades throughout her lifetime and has been a tireless advocate seeking justice on her son's behalf and campaigning throughout the world to advance the cause of racial justice and support young people to pursue education and achieve to their fullest potential. On a day when headlines across the country are falsely proclaiming that institutional racism doesn't exist in the UK, it's important to acknowledge that for nearly 3 decades, Baroness Doreen Lawrence has been steadfast in her commitment to seeking justice on her son's behalf and speaking truth to power about the realities of racism, inequity, and forms of injustice in British society. Most recently, the form of some of that work is captured in her 2020 review of the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 titled An Avoidable Crisis, where she called for a number of actions that would address the persistence of structural racism. We are also fortunate to be joined this evening by Imran Khan QC. Imran was a solicitor who represented the Lawrence family during the public inquiry into the murder of Stephen Lawrence. He is founding partner and head of criminal defense at Imran Khan and Partners. He is a leader in the field of human rights and criminal law. In 2019, De Montfort University was proud to recognize him as an honorand, and we are pleased to welcome him back to the university this evening. So again, we are so grateful to have you in conversation tonight and looking forward to talking to you. So Baroness Lawrence, this year will mark the 3rd annual national commemoration of Stephen Lawrence Day. For those in our audience who might not know, could you tell us a bit more about the journey towards establishing Stephen Lawrence Day? Baroness Lawrence, can you hear me? I think we might have frozen a bit. Baroness Lawrence, can you hear me?
Can't hear.
Okay. Can you hear me now? It looks like we've lost connection there. You can't hear me at this point. Let's see here. We're going to see if we can sign Baroness Lawrence back out and sign her back in. Please be patient with us. We're working and doing the best with technology there. Imran, I know you're involved in the Stephen Lawrence Day Foundation, and I was just wondering if you want to share a little bit about, the journey of establishing the day with the foundation and some of the work that is happening right now with the foundation.
It will be far better to have Baroness Lawrence tell you that, so apologies. Can I say I've stood in for Baroness Lawrence many times over the last 20 or so years, so this is not new to me. Yes, essentially, Doreen spoke to the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, I think it was a few years ago, one of the commemorations, memorial services for Stephen. I can't remember the precise one. And a discussion was had about marking the day, because there are other days in the calendar, both here and in other countries, which mark events, significant events in time. And to our amazement, because this was a Conservative Home Secretary, Conservative Prime Minister, Conservative government that we have today, which has produced a report which I'm sure that listeners would want to hear about, but it's quite shocking. But a decision was made that Stephen Lawrence Day would take place. And on that date, events would occur up and down the country in a way to both commemorate his life achievements, but it's also about his journey and what happened to him and the family's journey, which is so universal to those in the Black community. Issues about injustice, about race discrimination, all the things that the family have encountered. It's a day on which to remember those individuals, to remember what he went through, and to try and bring people together. So once that occurred, once that day was announced, Doreen and I, with others, set up the Stephen Lawrence Day Foundation in a year now. It's been a year. So not a long time. And that foundation will then be working towards celebrating the day for the first time from the foundation's point of view on the 22nd of April this year. So yeah, so that I hope gives some idea of how the day started and who's running it.
Yeah. In terms of the foundation, I know there are themes around communities, careers, and classrooms. Could you say a little bit more about how you all arrived at those kind of three domains of work that the foundation's going to be pursuing, work around Stephen Lawrence Day, but also just advancing Stephen Lawrence's legacy more broadly?
Yes, I think what we realized very early on, certainly Doreen, was that education was key to eradicating racism. I don't know whether any of your those who are viewing this and yourself will remember that one of the most horrific things that we saw during the case was young men who had been viewed in their homes having the most vile racist views, and these were young 16-year-olds at the time. And it soon became clear, certainly to Doreen, that if we're able to deal with the issue of racism at an early age in schools and educate people in relation to racism and discrimination, that we might not have adults who will go on to do the sorts of things that we see in this country. And so that became very much at the forefront of Doreen's thinking, certainly when she was at the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust and dealing with matters there. So schools became an integral part of the process, working with schools, putting on assemblies, sending literature to them. But of course, it simply doesn't stop once you leave the school gate. Yeah, racism exists wherever. So then, of course, the communities and how we deal with racism within communities. We've got Doreen back. So, Doreen, can you hear us? I've been pretending to be you for the last few minutes. Yes, I've been pretending to be you for the last few minutes. So I was just explaining, Doreen, about classrooms, communities, and careers, and just dealing with the communities. Of course, it's really important to be amongst the community, and I think the phrase is, whatever profession you've gone into, you've got to remember the community that you came from, and that community has got to be diverse. It's got to remember, and those who've been successful in their lives have got to remember where they came from, because those communities, certainly for my part, like I was brought up in the east end of London, excuse me, it remains a fairly deprived area. So again, dealing with that. And finally, on the careers, if we don't have people in jobs, in senior positions, in powerful positions, then we're never going to change the institutions. So all of those are a journey from when a person starts in life and is educated, goes out into the community, and also wants a career. All of those three C's, we hope, as part of what the foundation is doing and what the day is doing, is if we can affect all of those, it's a huge task, we can affect it. We hope that that will make a better society for all.
Baroness Lawrence, I don't know if you wanted to share. One of the things that I was asking about was just to give the audience a bit of a history behind, how we arrived at having a National Stephen Lawrence Day. And Imran gave us some background in terms of your work with the previous government in terms of establishing that, but I didn't know if you wanted to add a little bit more, because I do know, having looked at some of the materials in the archive, the idea of having a day to commemorate and a day to remember is not something that's new, that's been on the agenda of you and your family for a long time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how we arrived at the establishment of a National Stephen Lawrence Day.
Yes, it was something I've always thought about ever since when I first started the trust, because I felt that Stephen's name, Stephen, has made such a difference in this country, and I felt that there needed to be something to be celebrated of all the changes has taken place. So having a day, you know, if you go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, I've been discussing this with government, but I presume until I was sat in front of Theresa May to say this is what I would like, she was the only one that said, you know, that had agreed, and I was able to announce it back in 2018. So I think for that, as I say, it's the legacy of Stephen, you know, because I think a lot of young people see him as a role model. And the fact that his name has changed so many things in this country, laws have been changed. Because I think if we didn't have all the things that happened before, I presume the day wouldn't have made any sense. But I think the day does make sense now to have that as a national and hopefully international also.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think you mentioned the importance of young people knowing Stephen Lawrence's story. And I'd love to hear more about, you know, that why it is important. Why do you think in the 21st century, in 2021, that young people need to know Stephen Lawrence's story? One of the things we're struck by at the center is that so many of the university students that might come into the center when we're open and able to visit and welcome people into the center, oftentimes students for the first time, it might be, you know, hearing Stephen Lawrence's story and understanding all the things that happened as a part of your family's journey to justice. But, you know, why is it important to have Stephen Lawrence's story taught in classrooms and acknowledged in our educational landscape with young people today?
I think because there are times that there's so much negative about young Black men and young Black boys growing up. And Stephen can demonstrate and show that, you know, you may have a small percentage, but the majority of young people, well, are like Stephen. And they do have ambitions. They do know where they want to go. And so to have Stephen's legacy is pointing them in the right direction. Stephen was a fun-loving person. You know, I've always said Stephen was never perfect, so I don't know whether you think that he's this perfect person. You know, he was just like any other young boy growing up, has his dreams, his aspiration. He loves sports, you know, he loves music. And so I think what I'm trying to, for the center to show is that, you know, you can do and be whatever you want in life. You know, there should be nothing holding you back. As long as it's something that you want and you get the support from your family and your community, that would help you to achieve your dreams. You know, so that's what Stephen's name is all about.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I had asked Imran about, the foundation has these themes of classrooms, communities, and careers. And we were just trying to, if you wanted to say a little bit more about how you all arrived at that. I know you've done so much work around education and providing scholarships for students to study architecture and really, you know, take on, you know, work take on school at the university level. And so, you know, how did you all arrive at those three areas of work?
The 3 C's, I think it's sort of come through one of our trustees, because education has always been important to me. And I feel that we need to encourage our kids within education. But then there's also the community, because they're part of the community and they do get the support from there. And also we're part of the architectural stuff that I was doing around careers. You know, aspiration. We want to make sure that young people, it doesn't matter what their background, they can achieve whatever they like and to get into whatever it is jobs. I know that sometimes within the employment sector, they may struggle, but at the same time, if they're educated enough and they have the support of their community, the careers are out there, and it's for them to strive for that and to break down barriers, because that's what it's all about, you know, is to break through the glass ceilings, because there should be no glass ceilings for our children. and is to make sure that within the foundation we can help support young people to achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve.
Yeah. So if I think about the two of you all, one of the things that's been really interesting is you clearly are friends. You all have a lifelong friendship. And I was just curious about, how has the two of you, you and Imran's relationship been shaped by the work that you've been doing to kind of gain justice on Stephen Lawrence's behalf over the years? It's really interesting to see, the same solicitor who would be involved in these instrumental moments in the legal battles, still involved in the work of the foundation. So I think, I'm interested, and I think other people are interested in just how your relationship has been defined by really this kind of long-standing quest for social justice.
I leave Imran, he's always has some funny jokes to come out with. But I think from the first time we've met, I think we seem to be on the same level, the same where, because part of his work was around human rights and human justice. And that's where I find myself constantly being and talking about, and where I see myself. And over the years, we've just grown. So I think all the difficulties we've gone through from 93 are there's all different stages, like the inquest, the Macpherson inquiry, so you name it. I've had that support of Imran all the time, and yes, Imran is a friend. I can remember once we were, I think just after the inquiry, we were where this one police officer was being not disciplined, but he was being held to task for not following through in the first investigation, and the chair of that is like saying, well, who's Imran? So I said, like, he's my friend. But he's your solicitor? Yes, he's my friend also. And I think what they were trying to show is that there's no way you can have a friend in a legal profession in that way, in how our friendship has grown. But that's what it is. Our families are friends, because we have the same outlook on life. And, we want to follow the same type of justice, fairness, and looking at the injustice that so many people have faced. And, Imran's work has taken him all over. And he's always been there to support me, always. And in the early stages, when we first met, it didn't matter what time of the day that I phoned him, he would always pick up the phone. And not having a relationship, I'm not knowing anything about the law or what solicitors' lives were like back then. I find that he was always there for me and always there for my family. So, and that hasn't changed. That has not changed in the last 20 years. Has not changed. I don't know what Imran say about me.
Well, all I was going to say, this is a word exclusive. We're not friends, Doreen. Can I just say for the first time for the public? I'm kidding. It's really embarrassing hearing what Doreen said. I've been doing my job since I first met Doreen, and it's one of the most ironical things about this, that the things I've been able to do and whatever success I've had is on the back of somebody who's been murdered. I'm a father. You see a photo of my daughter many years ago, and I don't know that I could have survived in the way that Doreen has, as a result of Stephen's murder. And I saw that firsthand. And it was only when I became a father, 2 years after Stephen's murder, that I realized what pain Doreen must have been going through and having to deal with that. So, and it's only when you lose a child in that way, or in any way, that you realize. And so it's not me in this case. Doreen has always pushed me, sometimes really hard. She has a steeliness and determination in her, which is what has led her to achieve justice in the way that she has, and to do everything she does. So I've just been an instrument of Doreen in that way. And yes, we have become friends and remain friends because we have a similar outlook on life. But she's her own person, and she knows what she wants and how she's going to get it. So I'm simply there to provide whatever support I can. And it's been an honor and a privilege being associated with this case. The number of times when somebody's come up to me and say, aren't you Doreen's lawyer, not who I am. Aren't you Doreen's lawyer? And it doesn't bother me to be associated with it. When I was studying law, I never imagined that I'd be in such a situation. And the reason I'm invited here, I know the reason why I'm invited here, because I'm Doreen's lawyer, and that's it. And I'm happy with that. It's a privilege and honor to be seen in that way. And although I used to take Doreen's calls whatever time of day or night, that doesn't happen now, can I just say?
Oh, one thing I definitely wanted to make sure that, you know, we're sort of in a day, both of you, Baroness Lawrence, you mentioned the McPherson report as part of the journey that the two of you have been on together in terms of the long history of Stephen Lawrence's case. And then Imran, at the very outset, you mentioned, made reference to today's news about the report really denying the existence of institutional racism in Britain. And we are having some questions already popping up in the chat. Just, you know, given the decades of work that you all have done around this issue related to Stephen Lawrence's case, but also showing the ways in which Stephen Lawrence's story and the lived experience of your family is not, you know, it's not, you know, just a singular experience, but it is an experience that is oftentimes represented in wider communities, and it's not, you know, on its own, or doesn't sit on its own, but that it's been a case that's represented justice and the pursuit of justice on behalf of so many. I'm really curious about, you know, what your thoughts are about, you know, a moment where we're seeing these headlines, you know, after all of the work that you're continuing to do around these issues, you know, this kind of media narrative that we're now getting about this idea that institutional racism is something that doesn't exist. And I'm just curious about your thoughts about that.
I think when I heard the news this morning, my first thought was that the report has pushed racism back 20 years and more. I think if you were to speak to somebody who is employer, speak to him in a certain way, where do you go with that now? If a person needs for promotion and he's been denied that, where does he go with that now? You know, all the things that we've been working for and showing the structural racism that exists. We talk about the pandemic. When you look at how many of our people have died, all the nurses, the doctors, the frontline staff who have died through COVID. And to have this report is more or less denying that those people had suffered. They're denying that, you know, the likes of my son was murdered through racism, and the fact it took nearly 18 years to get justice for him because of racism. So all of those things, that the report now is denying all those issues. Those people who march for Black Lives Matters is denying all of that. The George Floyd stuff is denied all of that. So, you know, for those who sit behind and say in this report that racism doesn't exist or it no longer exists, you know, they need to speak to those young boys who are stopped constantly on the streets, stop and search. They need to speak to those young people.
Yes. Imran, did you want to
Yeah,
share?
I mean, like that, I was shocked, absolutely shocked. It's unbelievable. And one of the panel members on the Lawrence inquiry coined the phrase the reality spectrum, because when we were talking about racism back in the inquiry around the time that Stephen was murdered, there was one reality of those who were experiencing racism. There was another reality of the officers and the institutions. And so what this panel member said is that you've got to cross that reality spectrum. And that's what reminded me of today, is that those authors of the report are living in a completely different reality to those who are going about their business. And on the same day and on the same screen that I'm looking at the trial in the States, you're having this. What reality do the authors occupy when they see the statistics on stop and search, when they see the statistics in relation to the number of black people within the prison system, the disproportionate number of people who are getting convictions and so on, the data completely undermines that report. And you wonder whether it's the sort of thing that we got immediately after the Lawrence inquiry and the report. In fact, during the Lawrence inquiry, police officers were saying there's no institutional racism. And then after that, they said, well, there was, and now we've changed it. And that gives, unfortunately, those who would wish to peddle racism the opportunity now. They've been given the green card by this report to say, well, I'm not being racist. Racism doesn't exist. Institutional racism doesn't exist. So I'm afraid it's, as Doreen rightly said, it's put back the issue of tackling discrimination racism 20 odd years. We're back to square one. And that is disappointing, is an underestimation. It's an understatement. It is shocking, and to not put too blunt a point on this, it's not worth the paper it's written on. It is not the reality of Britain today. It really isn't. And they've got to, and this report, I hope, will not see the light of day. It will put into a cupboard and people forget about it, and we need to tackle the racism that we know that exists. I have client upon client who I deal with who complains about racism left, right, centre. No one's spoken to me about that. I wonder who they've spoken about and what this is out to achieve. Is this government seeking to draw a line on institutional racism because they don't want to deal with it? Because to deal with it is difficult. It requires changes to be made, structural changes. And this government doesn't want to do it. The individuals and the institutions don't want to do it. So we are in for a really rough ride. Those in the black communities, and I use that to cover everybody. The BME is a phrase which I also take some difficulty on. Black is a political term which describes all of us who are discriminated against by the majority white community. And we need to go back to that and to deal with it going forward.
Yeah, I think what both of you all said is so important in terms of, you know, the power, just the headline alone. I think a lot of people are still processing even the contents of what may or may not exist in the report, but just the idea that it's moved a conversation in a direction where we're now beginning to again try to make the case about the existence of institutional racism, despite all the data, despite all of the lived experience that represents a completely different reality, and the denial of that is something that
it denies our experience, Kenisha. It denies that, and that's the worst part of it. I mean, the times that you say, well, to somebody who might have made a comment, well, you said that, and it's like you haven't even said it, and that's shocking. It means that everything that I've experienced in my career, in my life, was nothing. It doesn't exist. I was making it up. I think the word is gaslighting, and that's what's happening here. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Kenisha. Apologies.
No.
I'm just so angry about it. I'm not supposed to show it in my professional career, but yeah, it's offensive.
Mm-hmm. But then it's also you find individuals who are privileged, who are sitting somewhere completely different. So they're not in touch with reality, basically. That's what it boils down to. When you're privileged, you don't have those experiences. So as Imran said, it's a lived experience that we all have. The mere fact that my son was murdered because of race. And we can't forget. And I think once you start covering it up and it's given the green light to racists, because you imagine what's going to happen come tomorrow. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen on our streets with our young people come tomorrow? Mm-hmm. You're giving the racists a green light, which is what they've.
And I think that's the other thing, that it's not just the denial, but the denial gives a license to a kind of an even deeper entrenchment, and that there will be consequences to the circulation of this denial, that the people that are on the receiving end of racism and racial violence, they will feel that. And so these sorts of statements and these conversations have real stakes attached to them. One of the things before we move on to our next segment, I just would like to ask you all a final question about, Leicester has been really active in supporting Stephen Lawrence Day over the last 2 years, but going into the third year as well. And we're really proud to be the home of the Stephen Lawrence Research Center at DMU. And one of the things I just wanted to ask you all, what are some of the ways that you would want local communities across the country to get involved in Stephen Lawrence Day and to support the work of the foundation? What would be your call to action to local communities?
That I'm not saying it's quite difficult, but then as a new organization for ourselves, as a new foundation, we are trying to put together what we would like to see the community do, and what we want to see schools do, and is looking at Black history and to incorporate that in the curriculum, because I think our young people, everybody needs to know what their history is like. And also beyond the school gate. So when you leave school, what happens to you when you're outside in the community? So I'm sort of working, and I know that you have the police cadets and the fire brigade cadets. So you have young people taking part in uniform type activities. So it's sort of, how do you help support those young people to give them the tools that they'll need as they grow up? So that's what the foundation is trying to, as we move forward, is look to develop tools that we can use to give to schools, give to the community, and look at how do we engage with with organisation, the employer, what it is that they're doing within their organisation to make sure that it's welcome for people of colour who are joining them, because sometimes they miss out on the talent that's there when they don't support or engage with people of colour. They're missing out on the talent.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Imran, did you want to add anything in terms of a call to action for local communities?
Just this, and I think it's a call to action to everybody. One of the things that I've seen, particularly as a lawyer in my professional capacity, is that unless somebody speaks up, things are not going to change. And there's been far too many people in society who have not called out race and not done something, and just thought it's somebody else's problem. It isn't. It's all of our problems. And one of the things that what I want to remind people about the Lawrence case was about, it wasn't about making life better for Black people. It made life better for everybody, because the changes that we got was about equality, fairness, all the things that all of us benefit from, whether we're Black or white. And so when you call out injustice or unfairness, and you take action like the young woman did when she was filming that horrific footage. I think she said in her evidence that she could have left or wanted to leave, but felt the need to be there and film it. And look what happened as a result of that. So if more people, wherever they see injustice, wherever they see discrimination, say something about it, certainly me as a lawyer, I can do something about it because I can advocate on their behalf, take action on their behalf, but that's not the only thing that you can do. Calling it out wherever it is, there's no longer any excuse for people not to do that. You can't remain neutral. You can't do nothing. You have to do something.
Absolutely. I would completely agree with both of your sentiments, that understanding the history of these conversations that we're having, but also speaking truth to power. And I think both of you all have been examples of that in ways that, it hasn't just been about a singular story, but you've spoken up in ways that have benefited the wider society in so many different ways. And I think that's the big issue, is really speaking up in the face of injustice. I want to thank you both for this segment. And I just want to let the audience know that Baroness Lawrence and Imran Khan will be joining us towards the end of the webinar again as part of the wider Q&A with the audience. So I'm going to now turn to the second segment of our webinar tonight. And tonight we're going to be joined as well by secondary students and local educators here in Leicester to learn more about the work that's been happening to support the aims and ambitions of Stephen Lawrence Day. So the first person that I'd like to welcome onto this panel is Linda Bradshaw. She's an accomplished educator of 25 years who's taught in schools in Australia, New Zealand, and South America. Linda worked as an advanced skills teacher for 12 years, sharing high standards of classroom practice with other educators before taking up her current position at the City of Leicester College as head of religious studies, where she leads the school's Eco Club and the Amnesty International Club. In addition to her work at the City of Leicester, Linda is a human rights activist and is the International Solidarity Officer for the Leicester arm of the National Education Union. Welcome, Linda.
Hi.
The next person I'd like to introduce is Kenisha, and Kenisha is a year 11 student at the City of Leicester College, where Linda teaches. Kenisha won a Sir Damon Buffini Achievement Award in 2018 as part of the Yes You Can program for promoting the voices of young Black people in Leicester. While she was in year 9, Kenisha attended the first Stephen Lawrence Day at DMU in 2019, where she recited a poem that she had written especially for Baroness Lawrence entitled Black Excellence. Since then, Kenisha has been a Stephen Lawrence student champion at her school, and she is currently preparing for her GCSE. So we're excited to welcome you this evening, Kenisha.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Natasha Boyce. Natasha's been teaching for 20 years and has held senior leadership positions for 8 of those years. For the last 4 years, Natasha has been an educator at the Life Multi-Academy Trust, where she is head of religious studies. She's also an associate senior leader with responsibility for community participation. With support of Life Multi-Academy Trust, Natasha has raised funds to send children to school in Liberia and is currently leading on a program that will see the trust develop new ways of delivering anti-racist teacher practices in the classroom. And that's some work that we at the SLRC are really proud to be a part of. So welcome, Natasha. And the last person that I'd like to introduce as part of this panel is Ruben, who's a year 10 student at the Winstanley School in Leicester. He's a young social activist and a Stephen Lawrence student ambassador at his school. In addition to his work as a student ambassador, he's represented the school Citizens UK Leicester Mayoral Assembly, and he's also a member of the Youth Council facilitated by Blaby District Council. Welcome to you, Ruben. So again, part of what we want to kind of talk a little bit about, you all have been on the front lines of helping to advance the work of the Stephen Lawrence Day Foundation and Stephen Lawrence Day in Leicester, particularly in schools in Leicester. So I wanted to just start with Linda and Natasha. Both of your schools participated in the first Stephen Lawrence Day at DMU experience to mark the first National Stephen Lawrence Day in 2019. Can you tell us a little bit about that day and why was it important to have your students participate in that experience? So I'll start with you, Linda.
Thank you, Kenisha. So for us, there's a group of us at my school who were really excited about the link with the Stephen Lawrence Centre, and we came as teachers to visit. And we felt it was really important for our students because where we're located, it's a very diverse community. But they're also, the students at our school are a very engaged community. So when I arrived and I started to teach about the Stephen Lawrence case, the students couldn't understand the injustice. They just couldn't understand why it took so long for the family and the fact that the family had to fight for justice. So they were already engaged and wanted to kind of know more. So for us as the group of us that kind of do all the planning and the work, we've kind of ingrained it into our lessons. We found ways of telling his story. Miss Douglas, the drama teacher, she's worked it into Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. As a team, the RS department, we've planned units that examine different aspects of it. So we've got at Key Stage 3, the hate crime, and then at Key Stage 4, the justice. And so the students get that understanding of injustice and feel really strongly about it.
Yeah. And what about you, Natasha? Why was it really important to have your students participate in Stephen Lawrence Day activities?
First, I just want to say it's an honor to be a part of this panel this evening, and to be able to share this platform with Baroness Lawrence and Imran Khan and your team and the other speakers. That's a real privilege. So I remember being invited to the listening activity in February 2019 and meeting with you, and Stuart was there and your team, and you shared the plans for how you wanted the centre to be used by local schools. And I left that session so inspired and saw it as such a necessary resource for students to access locally. So when you shared plans about the first conference, I knew that our students had to be there. And when we attended that conference and the rich workshops that really reflected Stephen as a person, looking at art and his archive materials and how we profile ourselves, what we want to be remembered for, and hearing Baroness Lawrence talk about her son and her fight for justice, it was so rich. It exceeded every expectation that I had from the listening activity, and I know that my students got a lot from it and were deeply impacted by it. And I did a lot of work beforehand, because actually I brought students from two schools. I brought a cohort of students from Winstanley and a cohort from Bosworth. And it was so hard to select them that I made them write a proposal as to why they deserve to come. And the proposals were so strong. And I know that they were the right students, because they left so inspired that they're now feeding that back into the Winstanley School, so and into Bosworth Academy. So what you're planning to do as a centre is far-reaching in terms of impact.
Thank you. And again, as a center, we've enjoyed working with both of your schools. I want to turn to you, Ruben and Kenisha. You all both participated in that first Stephen Lawrence Day experience at DMU. That was before our center even launched. So it was sort of a big event that we were so excited to welcome you to DMU. And I'm just, curious about what you all took away from that experience that day. And I'll begin with you, Kenisha. Can you say a little bit more about, what was that day like for you, and being a part of the first Stephen Lawrence Day activities here, and some of the first ones in Leicester?
I think I plan on going to university after sixth form. So I think the whole experience, just attending the university and just looking around, really impacted me, because it made me think about uni life as well as the Stephen Lawrence Foundation as well. And also just hearing Baroness Lawrence speak as well really inspired me. And just looking at the archive materials, and just it made me feel really connected to Stephen in a way. And it really made me feel like he was a kid like me and Ruben are, and like everyone around Leicester are, if that makes sense. And I wrote a letter to her, like on the way to obviously coming to the centre. I wrote a letter to her, but I had wrote this letter 3 times prior, because I didn't want to go there and come empty-handed, sort of. So I presented her with this letter that I literally wrote like 5 minutes before, seeing her. And she told me that she believed in me, and she just told me that she will write back. And I wrote my email address at the back of it as well. And that made me feel really heard, and it made me feel like someone was listening and someone is on my team. Like, I'm not going through this by myself. I'm not trying to make change by myself, but she also wants to be on this journey with me, and she understands me on that level.
Yeah, I know. I was wondering, I know you have that letter with you. Would you mind sharing it? I know you said that you wrote it that day.
Yeah. I'm going to read the first part because it's quite a long letter. Growing up in Leicester as a young Black female was hard for many reasons. Racial prejudice, racism, and discrimination has been a huge part of my life growing up, and started to take a toll on my mental health. That was until I was taught about Stephen and his legacy, a legacy that hit so close to home, it stuck by me and changed me for the better. A legacy so painfully beautiful that some shy away from the topic. And for a 13-year-old Black girl who thought she was the only one going through this, it changed me.
Wow, that is incredibly powerful. Thank you for sharing. Ruben, I want to turn to you. Can you share with us just your experience that day, that first Stephen Lawrence Day?
Again, with Kenisha, going around the university was such an almost surreal experience, because I have strong plans to go to university in the future, so it was a great insight into that as well. But going to the Stephen Lawrence Day, I think, was my first experience with true racism, experiencing it through the entire day looking at the archives, looking at the speeches that Baroness Lawrence wrote for us, getting to meet her on the day. It was such an incredible experience and has inspired me for a long time to work against racial injustice with Miss Boyce, to work with her and the other Stephen Lawrence ambassadors at our school to really look at the issues in our community and fight against them. It was just an incredible experience all throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. And you also on that day shared a poem with really all of the schools and the students that were part of that day. And I was just going to ask you whether or not you were able to share that with our audience tonight. That was
I have it prepared. Your son was a great man, and how you must have been in grief, all thanks to a horrible thief. Racism is a horrible subject which caused your son to lose his knife, all thanks to a horrible thief and a much more horrible knife. Your experiences have changed so many others. The loss of a son has affected such a great mother. We have this day to commemorate a great man. He should not have died, but he could have done things no one else can. Live on, the great woman you are, use what has happened, and take care.
Oh, wow. And so thank you for sharing that. Now, both of you all participating in the DMU Stephen Lawrence Day experience have gone on to continue your activist work in your own schools. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've taken Stephen Lawrence's legacy forward in your schools? And Kenisha, I'll start with you.
I feel like Stephen Lawrence Day was sort of a wake-up call for the City of Leicester College. That was a starting point, and it was more of a wake-up call than an experience. That awoke so many conversations with different members of staff that from that day, I've made it my mission to change how racism is viewed in our school. For example, I've had a conversation with the deputy head about the lack of diversity in the senior leadership team. And that was a very difficult conversation and a very eye-opening conversation because no one from the student's point of view had raised that with anyone from obviously the student leadership team. And we spoke about how we can change that and how a more diverse senior leadership team could open up so many new conversations with people younger down in the school, and how students aren't really comfortable talking about racism, or students aren't really comfortable sharing their personal experiences with racism due to the lack of diversity in the staff. And we also talk about making a platform for not only me, but other students in the school so that they can share not only their experiences, but how we can overcome racism within the school. And I feel like a school is meant to depict society. So if we can't talk about these things in school and ask the question of why, then these people in our school are going to go on to be shying away from the topic, if that makes sense. And they're going to now decide to not open up about the greater image and the greater stories that they've also experienced. So I think having a more diverse staff is going to really open up those conversations within our school. And Stephen Lawrence has been an example to us. And we didn't want it to get that bad, if that makes sense. It's so sad that it's taken a death of a young Black male to realize that there is a problem in society. And I feel like people are in denial, kind of, that there is a problem. And even though it was so long ago, there is still that problem today. For example, with George Floyd, that is another thing that's happened, which is so terrible, but has opened up that conversation. But why does it have to get that bad? It all starts with us. It all starts with the youth. If we can change society at such a young age, it's not going to get that bad, and it won't get that bad. If people like the police officer that murdered George Floyd, if they had studied, stories like this in school, it wouldn't have got that bad. And I feel like we can make a huge change. And not only the City of Leicester College, but other schools around the country can make such a huge change. But we need to open up that conversation. We need to start that conversation before anything can really happen. But it all starts with us.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think one of the things that was so powerful about what you said was just a place of education and schools being on the front lines being possibilities for where change is going to happen when we're talking about issues of racial injustice. So thank you for that. I think that in and of itself was a huge call to action. Ruben, can you tell us a little bit more about some of the work that you've undertaken at your school since participating in the first Stephen Lawrence Day at DMU?
I feel like I have a lot to work up to now that Kenisha said all that. That was so great. At our school, we've been really focusing on our diversity aspect. Our school is so diverse with so many races, religions, ethnicities, beliefs. It's just been so much about awareness, bringing awareness to all the students that had no idea this would have even happened if we hadn't told them. Being able to, even though I know I will never be able to experience it truly as you all have, I know that I can be there as a building block to help to empower them and bring their stories to light and help them to get through it and help and make a defense system for them so they know that they can feel secure as who they are. And that's been a real big focus that Miss Boyce has been a great help in being able to achieve. We've made a week dedicated to Stephen Lawrence in school where we've done tons of activities based around movements about Black lives and the Stephen Lawrence What Has Happened. We've organised different activities that we're hopefully going to get into school soon that we can do. And just assemblies and stuff like that, just letting people know what's been going on and organising tons of stuff with all the rest of the students as well.
Yeah, you all have an Stephen Lawrence Ambassadors Club. How did that come into being?
Again, that was something that happened after the day. That was something that Miss Boyce was really pioneering. That's all of us there. They're all such great students working towards defeating racial inequality. We've had tons of meetings in and out of lockdown, meeting in person, meeting over calls. And we've just been discussing with them how we can combat it in our school and what we can do for it. Mm-hmm. And I suppose it really came to fruition because of, again, Miss Boyce and the hard work she's been doing. The students that were really touched by it on the day and wanted to work forward to it, they came to Miss Boyce and started talking to her about it. And I think it was the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre that made the idea of the Stephen Lawrence Ambassadors. And so Miss Boyce was the one that actually brought that into our school and helped us to work towards that. And well, that's where the group came from.
Yeah. And like I said, I think that's another really powerful way in which, having that experience, really taking on the legacy of Stephen Lawrence and in both of you all schools, really showing how that awareness sort of really emboldens you to speak up on issues and to raise and to raise the concerns about the things that are happening around you in your schools. And so I think both of you all are a powerful testament to what that can look like and how a single student can really inspire change all around them and really inspire a work around them with other students. So I just want to ask really quickly, what are your plans for commemorating Stephen Lawrence Day 2021 at your schools? Ms. Linda, would you like to come in? Say a little
yeah, sure. So we have the title is Legacy for Change. But I do think in response to what's happened today, I think some of our plans will have to change because the students, I think when they return, will want to talk about the report. Our students are really, as you can see from Kenisha, very politically active and very kind of interested in their world. So I think the plans we had, we were going to do it in relation to Legacy for Change, and Miss Douglas leads on this. And what she was going to do is do a competition around Stephen's career as an architect, his desired profession. So we've got that all in place. But I think in response to what Kenisha said, I think I'm going to let the students direct us a bit more about what we're going to do for it. But we've got like drama, we've got things in place, we've got things in RS and science, but I think it needs to be whole school. And I think we're going to have to plan it when we get back. We've got it, but we're going to plan it with students. I think, Kenisha?
I think student voice is very important, particularly in our school, because our school is very opinionated and we really want to create change, but I feel like change starts with us. So, and also the thing where you can't be what you can't see. So, I feel like we need to bring in a point of view to educate teachers, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not trying to like flip the script or anything, but I feel like sometimes teachers need to be, I think sometimes teachers need to be educated. I feel like sometimes we have to tell our real life stories in order for people that don't go through what we go through and more privileged people to understand why we're so opinionated and why we really want to push for change. So I feel like it's going to be more of like students leading the sessions, and we want to empower the younger generations as well, like the younger people down school. We want to empower them to speak out, and we want to show them that they too have a voice, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think both you and Ruben are powerful reminders. Even in tonight's webinar, there's so much that we have to learn from young people, and so we do need to make sure that those voices are heard, and that what we're doing is responsive on the ground to the ways that they are viewing and making sense of the world. Natasha, I just want to turn it to you about giving us a view of some of the things that might be happening in the Life Multi-Academy Trust around Stephen Lawrence Day.
So Ruben referred to the ambassadors. So we have Stephen Lawrence student ambassadors in all year groups, so from year 7 to year 11. And they have actually planned a whole suite of activities that will be going whole school. We've also got students currently drawing art portraits of Stephen, because we know Stephen loved art. So we've got students focusing on drawing pencil portraits, and we're going to have an exhibition during that week. We've got takeovers of PE lessons because Stephen loved PE. So all the PE lessons when we go back are going to be dedicated to athletics. We've got students that have written songs about Stephen, and they're going to be analysing the songs, and that's going into all classes. We've got and none of these activities have been planned by me or any other teacher. They've all been planned by the students. And the reason why I've got the ambassadors doing the work is because Baroness Lawrence has set us such a powerful example of how you can be relentless in bringing change, and how we have agency, that if we're not happy with something is unjust, then we can do something about it. So the whole premise of the students doing the work is to show that they have the agency to bring change. So we've got lots of exciting events. I can't share all of them. We'll make sure that we take lots of pictures, and we've got the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre coming and doing takeovers. We're going to do the virtual tour of the exhibition. We've got a whole catalogue of things going on. And we're going to raise a flag as well. We've designed a flag that's going to go at the front of the school. So, yeah, it will be good. And it's all to remember Stephen as the person, to be connected with Stephen as a person.
Absolutely. Thank you both for all of you all for sharing a bit and really giving some concrete ways in which other schools across the city and across the nation can get involved in the work of Stephen Lawrence Day. And I think one of the things that's just been really powerful about this segment is that, it's not just an activity. It's not just a kind of tick box thing that you do on one day, but seeing what these students have gone on to do and the ways that they speak about the work that they do sort of shows that, it's not just a singular story, but it has a real power to inspire change on so many different levels. So I want to thank the students for being a part of this segment. I'm going to ask Linda and Natasha to stay on for our last segment, our final segment. So thank you again, Ruben and Natasha, Ruben and Kenisha. And we're going to shift to our third segment with local educators. I'd like to welcome to the panel this evening Camille London Mayo. And Camille is joining us. She's been a teacher and middle school senior leader in inner city schools for the past 30 years. She's also an active trade unionist and became the first Black president in the history of Leicester's Teachers Union in 2018. Camille is also a co-founder of the Black Educators Alliance, a national group of Black educators who seeks to challenge the institutional racism that exists in education, and is a co-founder of Leicester's Black Educators Network. Additionally, Camille is a community activist who helps to build networks to give support to parents of Black children while challenging the narrative of the underachievement of Black pupils in UK schools. She's also a co-founder of the Phoenix Agenda Supplementary School, also based in Leicester. And I have to pause to say how many times I said the word co-founder or found, that you build stuff to get stuff done. One of the things we're also really excited about here at the Stephen Lawrence Research Center is that Camille was awarded a PhD studentship at DMU and began her work in October 2020 in our PhD program. And she's doing work on Black educators who are navigating the dynamics of racism in Leicester schools. So welcome, Camille, and thank you for joining us this evening. I think your sound, okay, I want to make sure
I realized the sound was off, sorry.
So I wanted to begin with you, Camille. I know your PhD research, but also your longstanding activist work on the ground as both, a member of the local community and being part of the community, but also working in the educational sphere. And I'm just curious what you would have to say about the connections between Stephen Lawrence's case and Stephen Lawrence's legacy and race and education. We know that, the McPherson report had recommendations around education, but how would you characterize that relationship between the significance of Stephen Lawrence's legacy and these questions around race and education that we're still grappling with now?
Yeah, I think that what's critical in terms of the legacy of Stephen Lawrence is that what we should have learned is that we have to challenge discrimination. We have to challenge the obstacles to achievement for all communities. We have to challenge those obstacles whenever we see them. And I think that what we are still learning 30 years later is that those obstacles are still there. And if anything, they're even more entrenched. And so I think, I know for me, and I know for a lot of Black teachers, that we look at the inspiration and the doggedness of Baroness Lawrence, who stayed with it for so many years, even when, even when she was told that she was wrong and that the family were told that they didn't know what they were talking about. 18 years, so I feel really strongly that whatever we're going through now, it's for a time, but we just need to keep on pushing.
I wanted to kind of pose a similar question to Linda and Natasha in terms of just the legacy of the Stephen Lawrence's case and its relationship and his legacy and the relationship to education and issues around race and education. What would you say is the kind of current state of play in terms of issues of racism in education? And I'll start with you, Linda.
I've been working quite closely with the Black teachers across the UK, and we've been coming up with like a charter for change. We've been coming up with a curricula for change. So we're preparing what we feel is needed to try and, to change what's happening, the current picture in education. It can't continue. This report has been so damaging, but like Camille said, we've just got to keep pushing because it can't continue. Our children are, the Kenisha story, the first time I've heard some of her story. So it can't continue. So we've got to keep pushing and we've got to do it collectively. And these organizations that we create, that's how we build each other and we build the systems.
And Natasha, did you want to could you add some of your thoughts to that?
Yes, well, I feel like we need to kind of look at the context that we're in, especially returning to school after the summer. And the whole conversation around race and racism changed on March the 25th with the murder of George Floyd. And we returned back to school in August. And we needed to provide a framework for our students to understand what happened, whether they were Black or not Black, and also to give teachers the tools to engage in those conversations in a healthy way. So I believe that there's still more work. I think it started, but there's still more work to be done in terms of racial literacy. And personally, with the Life Mat, the work of the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre has been critical to that, because Kenisha, you were the keynote speaker when we returned to school, speaking to all the teachers in the Winstanley School, making sure that they were aware of what happened and what that means, and had tools to face those children when they return back to school. And your team has delivered training throughout the year. And I think that we, as in education, we can talk about the curriculum and we can talk about working with students, but we need to address all levels of teaching. We need to empower teachers to have these conversations. And we know, as Kenisha said earlier, that there's a problem of representation of Black teachers at leadership level. So if Black teachers are not at leadership level, then our influence on the curriculum is limited. So we need to use the traction that is being given to us to push for the agenda of racial literacy for all teachers and all children and governors as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to ask all of you all in terms of the tools that you know, teachers like yourselves would need in schools to advance these issues around racial justice. What would that look like? What does it look like to help empower educators to be able to broach these issues and to provide and to be a part of building an environment where students like Ruben and Kenisha are able to have the conversations and to be able to think about the things that are happening in the world around them? What's inhibiting some of that in schools? And I want to kind of turn to you, Camille, to say a bit. I mean, I know that's a broad question, but you know.
No, but you might not like my answer, so therefore I'm kind of like watching you and going, okay. Yeah, you know, when change happens in education, it happens from the top. Yeah, and what has been happening for far too long is that individuals, Black teachers, white teachers as allies, have been working on the ground, mobilizing young people, changing parts of the curriculum here, there, and everywhere. But if there is not the drive from the top, then no change will happen. And the reality, when we look at senior leadership teams right across the country, they are predominantly white in Black schools. Well, not Black schools, predominantly Black schools. We don't see the representation there. And because we don't see the representation there, the discussions that are had about curriculum, about what is needed, those conversations are not being had. We have, I think it's like a papering over of what some areas, some schools, some trusts think they can get away with just to keep people happy. Yeah. And I think we've gone past that time where we could just have a bit of music and a bit of dance and everybody's going to be fine as long as it's multicultural. We have to deal with the critical things that we do in school, that is about knowledge and is about the fact that all communities contribute to knowledge, and that all communities can provide leadership, and that we have to show it at all levels. So when you say, what tools do teachers need? Forgive me if I say those tools have been out there for years and years and years, and they have periods of time where schools are very proactive about it, then it's not convenient for them to be on it, and so they try something else, and then they might come back to it because somebody's complained or something's been on the news. But for me, what was the worst? Well, one of the worst, when Natasha was saying what happened after young people returned to school after George Floyd, after the summer of Black Lives Matter, there should have been a plan in place about how schools nationally should address this thing. It should not have been the case that isolated schools were putting together their responses to how we should address race in school. This is not an old issue. This is a long time issue. Yeah, the issue is that it's not being driven from where it should be, which is where the power is, and that's at the top. I'll say that now. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
No, I think I don't know if Linda, if you wanted to add anything to that. I think again, addressing a kind of long-standing power, some issues around the power structures is really an important point to keep in mind. And your point too that, you know, it's about not necessarily not that the tools aren't there, but about this question of engaging them, you know, and the kind of willfulness not to engage in these issues and to turn away and to not engage some of the resources that are available to actually address and to think critically about some of these issues. So Linda, I'll turn to you.
I think for some it's just too difficult a conversation to have. It's too sensitive. And as Camille said, space is allowed, but it's not continuous, or it's not deeply embedded, or it's not done in all areas. And like Natasha talked about, we made a statement, but it came from the Black teachers themselves, and it's not owned by the school. About George Floyd, sorry. So it's about them at the top making space and being brave enough to take it on board that there's an issue. It's a sense of, you know, a matter of bravery. They've got to, you know, own it, that there's racism in the institution.
Natasha, would you add anything to that?
Definitely, because I think that we've been doing some great partnership work, Kenisha, with the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre. And I recognise that that's a fortunate position to be in, especially in the Winstanley School, because conversations with my head teacher were very frank and very open, but he has got a commitment to social justice. And he, as a head teacher, has decided that he wants an inclusive school, and recognizes that the issue at hand right now is creating an anti-racist environment. That is the burning issue. And because of agreement in that area, we've been able to empower the ambassadors. That's given us space to have Kenisha as a keynote speaker, and also deliver training across 3 secondary schools in the Multi-Academy Trust. But that's just one school, as you quite rightly said, and there needs to be a national effort. But hopefully from this one example and the examples that we're talking about today, we are models of excellence, and we're showing what can be done when there's passion. And I think that as Black professionals, we shouldn't get downhearted. We're in a position of being unapologetic. We know that there's an issue, and we have the opportunity to talk about that, and we need to use our platform, because no one can deny, they might be trying to deny that institutional racism exists today, but we know that that's not true. And we need to keep that torch and keep fighting that fight.
Yeah, thank you to all of you for sharing that. I think one of the big takeaways is, again, you know, the tools are out there. It's about how we engage, and how do we build engagement, not just in a singular kind of piecemeal kind of way, but again, I've heard you all talk about even having whole school approaches to things, but whole community approaches to things that we need. And we know that there, you know, even here in Leicester, you know, some of these issues, not some of these issues, all of these issues that we can talk about, you know, nationally are represented within our community. So how do we have whole communities, whole national approaches to some of these issues to kind of address issues around racism within education and how it manifests in ways that are disproportionately harming racially minoritized children, and the ways that we see that historically, and those things are persisting, both in terms of what's happening in the classroom with students, but also in terms of Camille's work in shedding light to the experience of Black educators, and that they are not insulated from, you know, the racism that exists in the broader education landscape as well. So thank you all for that. I want to, in our final minutes, open up a conversation with our audience, and I want to bring back in Baroness Lawrence and Imran Khan as we turn to questions from the audience. And I want to invite people to still add in their questions and comments as they come forward. While we kind of transition there, I don't know if I was going to ask Baroness Lawrence a quick question, but it looks like she's moved.
No,
Baroness, that's okay. Baroness Lawrence, I was just going to ask. That's okay. While we just sort of take some more questions in the chat, one of the things I wanted to ask you and Imran as well, between the segments with the educators and the students, I wanted to know whether or not you all had some comments about some of the things that were shared about this arena of education, because I do know that that's been an area of focus for you for so many years. And I'm just curious whether or not you had anything that you wanted to add in response to some of the things that they've said.
I was thinking about the two young people, what they had to say. And I think it's so important to hear young voices, because I think when you look to Kenisha, what she had to say is very powerful for somebody so young. And, you know, that she talked about being political science and all of that. I just think, you know, her thoughts of how she sees things and how she wants to see things change is what we want our young people to be able to demonstrate within themselves, not with us as adults trying to sort of bring them along with us, but for them to have a thought of their own. And I thought she was very powerful in what she said. And Rubin, I mean, so his poem, you know, it's as a young man, you know, and as you say, not really having the experience of what somebody of color was going through, his thought process of what has gone on, you know, I just think, you know, our young people is our future. So we just need to keep nourishing them in order to help them to grow and to be the people who they want to be. You know, and I think that, listen to the educators, I just think for once upon a time for Black teachers, it would have been very difficult for you all to use your platform as teachers to speak out about racism and what's happening within your school. But I think what's been happening in the last, say, 10 years and moving forward, it has given you that strength that you're able to do that and to be more challenging, which is, I think, what we all need to be, is to challenge when we see injustice and to challenge the schools that, you know, our children are coming out. They need to have a rounded education, and without having teachers like yourself and speaking up and trying to educate them in all areas of life. So I think this is what I thought about within the curriculum. Our history lessons needs to change, because if it doesn't change, you have all the kids coming out thinking they have no idea what their background is, where their families come from, or going back to the British Empire. I heard the word mentioned this week. The British Empire, what they've done is strip the countries of all their wealth and resources. And that's the reason why the countries are where they are today. And those information, the children need to know and understand those issues. Because, you know, you're coming here taking our jobs and all this rubbish that, you know, you hear people talk about. Is because they strip these countries of all their resources. So they have nothing to support the country anymore, because they don't have those things anymore. So, you know, I just think that we're in a time when we can be more challenging and make sure that the schools are churning out well-rounded and educated young people to go into the future.
Imran, I don't know if you wanted to add anything in relation to some of what's been shared about sort of thinking about education.
Only this. It was inspirational. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up when I was listening to those young people. I had no idea, and I go about my business in the law. I'm not an educator, I don't go into schools. I wish I had teachers like you when I was at school, can I tell you that. I went to a comprehensive in the East End of London. You can imagine what that was like with 1,300 students, and racism was rife. The fact is, if the case and what Doreen has done has made a difference, and it clearly has, and empowered people, that is so inspirational. And I don't think Doreen perhaps more so, because she hears it a lot more than I do, that what she's done and what the case has done has changed people's lives and allowed them to articulate what they want to, and to challenge what they're doing in the way that the students are doing is just phenomenal. It means, it gives pride in what we've done and what we're doing, and it means that we ought to continue, and to know that that is happening to young people who are going to make the changes for the future. It's phenomenal, and I'm really pleased I heard that. Really, really pleased.
So one of the questions from the audience that's been posed, and these again are relating to education, but how do we? One of the folks commenting in the chat says that Audrey Lord says we need different tools to dismantle the master's house. Does this also apply in the UK? It goes back to this question, and I'll look at you, Camille, because we asked this question about the tools are out there, but do we need some different tools? I guess the question's being posed there.
I think that we don't need different tools. We just need to sharpen up the tools that we have. I think that we're in a situation where some of us have forgotten the power of community. We've forgotten the power of collective working. And we have to recognize that education is the responsibility of all of us. It's not just on the schools. It is our communities that support the schools. It's our families that support the children in their schools. And if we understand that and we bring back that idea about building that social capital within our communities so that we can challenge and support our young people when they face the institutional racism that continues to exist, we'll give them the tools to be able to challenge it a bit better. So that would be my answer.
I don't know, Linda or Natasha, if you wanted to say anything about the tools. And this is also related to their questions as well in the chat about, just understanding how best to challenge racism in education so that attitudes change. And I don't know if either of you wanted to say something about what tools have you found useful in your work. And we know it hasn't obviously solved the problem and made, things all go away neatly, but what have been some of the tools that have been useful in promoting change in the environments that you've been working in? And I'll start with you, Linda.
Like Kenisha has made reference to, student voice is very important at our school. So we had anti-bullying ambassadors, we had student council, and they lead on. We very much about the students being the heartbeat and the community being the heartbeat. So they lead on a lot of that, and they would do assemblies that kind of put the community at the focus in the assemblies. And we have, like you mentioned earlier, we have the Amnesty group, and the Amnesty students would talk about Stephen's case, and they talk about the injustice. And so what that does is it gives our students a good sense of justice, a clear understanding of what justice is. And they start to look at how to fight injustice, like they looked at the case to see how you both fought against it. So it's just giving the students their voice and the power. That's what we can do at my school.
What about you, Natasha?
I think there's a lot to be said about focusing on the character of students. So looking at strengths and virtues. And when we look at the example of Baroness Lawrence, and Baroness Lawrence, your relentless pursuit for justice and never giving up, I think that focusing on that for students empowers them to see that they have the agency to bring change. So regardless to whatever situation they find themselves in, if they have those character strengths and virtues, then they wouldn't be able to navigate themselves through the situation, because we can't categorize and define every situation that a young person will find themselves in. But if we give them the strengths and the virtues, such as a relentless pursuit of justice, then they will find a way to navigate and get the outcome that is necessary. And that is beneficial for them in terms of integrity, but beneficial for the wider community.
Mm-hmm. And Camille, did you want to add something to that in terms of about this question of tools? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a lot of really good work that has happened with PSHE that has given the opportunity for lots of people to be engaged in education and to give children an insight into alternative viewpoints, etc. But we also have the pushback from government with their review of PSHE and saying that they didn't want victim narratives going on in the classroom, etc. So what we have to do as educators is always be on the front foot of pushing back against regressive narratives that are saying that the voices of everybody shouldn't be heard. And I think that's part of holding on to a lot of the good PSHE work that is going on out there. So that's one of the tools, sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's a really concrete something in the curriculum, a space to leverage change. I know we're coming to the close of our time, and I wanted to just turn to Baroness Lawrence for a final word. And in that final word, just what would be your message to all of our viewers, to communities? What would be your message about the importance of Stephen Lawrence Day and what communities and what people can do around that, whether it's universities, whether it's community organizations, whether it's teachers, whether it's students? What would you like to see in terms of the promise and potential of Stephen Lawrence Day moving forward?
I think having all the people on the panel here and our young people, it has demonstrated what you all are doing already, or what you're looking forward to do. So I think without having the support and the strength of the young people and you as teachers, and so that is what I feel that has pushed me forward, and that would help around the Stephen Lawrence Days, because having all of you showing demonstration of what it means to have a Stephen Lawrence Day, and what the school will be doing, what the young people are engaging with, that is for me what a Stephen Lawrence Day is all about. Is those collectiveness of everybody working together, not one person trying to deliver, but everybody working collectively, which is what we all need to do, is work collectively. And that's how so without having someone like Imran on my side, so I never say this is all down to me. I've had people around supporting me, that have helped me to get to the position I am here today. So by listening to the people on the panel, our young people, they're the ones who are going to drive the Stephen Lawrence Day for the future. So it's like giving them the tools then and sharpening the tools for them that will help them to deliver the day.
Thank you for that. And I think one of the other things that comes across so strongly in everything that's been said here today is just the importance of being in community, being in relationships, and that, it's not a singular journey, but it's about how we link up with one another, how we join together in solidarity around some of these issues. I think that's another very powerful a message that's come through the panel today. I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to definitely give a special thanks to Baroness Lawrence and Imran Khan, to our educators, Linda, Natasha, and Camille, as well as to our students, Kenisha and Ruben, who were incredibly inspiring in so many ways. So thank you all for a wonderful conversation and a really powerful way for us to understand what the purpose of Stephen Lawrence Day is and the power of it. I think the students really demonstrated that the power of Stephen Lawrence's story and the story alone being itself a force for change. I want to, again, thank our audience as well for engaging in the chat. There have been so many comments and different questions that have been raised. So I want to thank everyone who's participated. And you can follow the work of the Stephen Lawrence Research Center online. And our next exchange event will be our Scholar Activism event on April 28th. But in the meantime, there are a lot of activities that are going to be going on around Stephen Lawrence Day here in Leicester. We're going to be doing a number of classroom takeovers, and the foundation's website will also outline some of the work that they're doing nationally for schools and across the country with Stephen Lawrence Day. Again, I thank you all and have a wonderful evening.